Hello, I'm Chris Stark, and welcome to my home studio. This video is part of a series that I'm doing on home recording and home studios. And in this video, we're going to discuss the core of any home recording setup. That is the computer workstation and the bits and components related to that to make it all work. So regardless of what kind of music that you're making in your home studio, all of us have a common core set of requirements in terms of the tools that we need in order to make the songwriting and recording process happen. And I'm going to go over my top 5 of essential bits of gear that you need to get started with writing and recording at home. When it comes to the gear that you need to start writing and recording music in your home studio, if you've done any research at all online, you know very quickly that it becomes kind of a rabbit hole, even a rabbit hole leading into a black hole of just overwhelming amounts of information and seemingly nobody agreeing on anything. Well, welcome to the internet, I suppose. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to list what I consider to be my top 5 essential pieces of gear to get started. And of course there's, little bits and pieces, accessories that you're going to need along the way, and you'll just have to pick those up as you go and as you figure out what you need. But there's some kind of pillar type foundational bits of gear that are absolutely essential in order to get started. So I'm going to list them out and then we're going to go into detail. So my top 5 essentials are: number 1, a computer; number 2, an audio interface; number 3, studio monitors, speakers; number 4, headphones; and number 5, some sort of room treatment. Now let's go into detail about each of these. When selecting a computer for your home studio, there's a few things that you want to keep in mind. First thing is the CPU. Now, in general, there's 2 main measures that you're looking at. You're looking at the number of cores and the speed of the processor. More cores is better, faster speed is better. The faster speed means things get done quicker. The more cores mean more things can happen simultaneously. So in a recording setup, when you've got a lot of plugins and you've got a lot of things going on at the same time, more cores means that your computer can handle more tracks, more plugins, things like that. The next thing you want to consider is RAM, or memory. This is the active storage. This is where things that you're currently working on get stored in your computer. So it's not a permanent storage location, it's just the working storage. So typically, with a music workstation, you want to get as much RAM as you can. RAM is generally a cheaper component at this point in time, so if you can afford to get 32 gigabytes or 64, the more that you can afford, the better. I would consider, at this point in time, 16 gigabytes to be an absolute minimum. If you can get 32 or more, that would be better. The next thing to consider with your computer is storage. And there are 2 aspects to storage to keep in mind when making your selection: capacity and speed. Older rotating hard drives tend to be quite large in their capacities, and their prices are generally pretty reasonable, but the performance isn't great. Now, the alternative to those spinning hard drives are solid-state disks, or SSDs. Now, the performance of SSDs is lightning fast compared to the older hard drives, but the prices are generally quite a bit higher, and the capacities are generally quite a bit lower. My recommendation is to get the highest capacity SSD that you can afford, because the performance benefits really outweigh any sort of savings that you get in a larger capacity rotating disk. So the fourth thing to consider when selecting your computer are the available ports on the computer. You want to make sure that you have enough USB ports and any other type of accessory ports to make sure that all of the things that you have and need to be able to connect to the computer have a place to be connected. The fifth thing to consider when making your selection is the form factor of the computer: a laptop versus a desktop. Now, the right answer is going to be based on your particular needs, and so let's talk about a little bit of the pros and cons of each. The biggest advantage to a laptop, of course, is its portability. You've got a built-in screen, keyboard, and trackpad, plus battery power, so you can work on music projects without even being tethered to a wall outlet. The main advantage of a desktop system is you typically get a little bit more bang for your buck. Typically, desktops have faster available CPUs with more cores. You can generally pack more RAM in there, and the hard drive capacities tend to be much larger in desktop systems. Plus, you generally have a lot more available ports. Now, even though desktop systems tend to be more powerful than laptop systems, a laptop may still meet your needs just fine, and the portability may actually be the deciding factor for you. So, of course, no discussion on computers would ever be complete without the hot button topic of Mac versus PC. Well, I'm actually going to recommend that we sidestep that for just a moment and focus instead on deciding on the right digital audio workstation software, or DAW software, that fits you best. So how do you determine which DAW software is going to be the best fit for you if you don't have a computer yet and therefore can't test these things out? Well, this is where I'm going to recommend that you reach out to friends and colleagues that record music and ask them about the software that they use, and ask them what they like and don't like about the software tools that they have. If you notice that a lot of your friends and colleagues are using the same DAW software, that's actually a pretty good vote in its favor. Not that you want to become a pest or anything, but your friends and colleagues can actually serve as a resource if you have questions in the future. Once you've decided on your DAW software, the decision of Mac versus PC may actually have already been made for you. Some DAW software only runs on Mac, some only on Windows, but then there are some that run on both. Now, if you decide on a DAW software that runs on both, my advice to you is to pick the platform that you're most comfortable with. If you're a Mac user, stick with the Mac. If you're more comfortable on Windows, go PC. It's as simple as that, really. Second on the list of essential gear for your home studio is the audio interface. This is a device that connects to your computer, and its role is to get audio in and out of your computer. When selecting an audio interface, a couple of important factors to consider are the number of inputs and outputs that the audio interface has, as well as the type of connector that it uses to connect to your computer. Now, of course, there are a ton of other features to consider when you're comparing audio interfaces and trying to make that decision on which one to buy. But what I would recommend that you do is set yourself a budget and look for the device that has the best combination of specifications and meets your needs for the price that you set. Coming in third on the list of essential gear for your home studio are studio monitors, or studio speakers. Studio monitors are quite different from home theater speakers. The goal of home theater speakers is to make movies and music sound great, and they do that by accentuating low and high frequencies while cutting out some of the mid-range frequencies. The goal of studio monitors, on the other hand, is accuracy. An ideal pair of studio monitors will reproduce sound without boosting or cutting any frequency across the spectrum, giving you the most accurate and precise reproduction of the sound that you've recorded. Studio monitors tend to range in price from quite expensive to ridiculously expensive, and the more expensive a set of monitors is, typically the better the accuracy is. So it's all about finding a compromise, and your best bet is to look at online reviews and talk to your friends and colleagues about what monitors they use in their home studios. Coming in at number 4 on the list of essential gear for your home studio is a good set of studio headphones. One of the things to look for in your studio headphones is the same thing you want to look for in a good set of studio monitors, and that's accuracy. A lot of headphones are geared to make music sound great by boosting low and high frequencies and cutting out some of the mid-range. That's not helpful for studio headphones because accuracy is important. One of the reasons why you need headphones in addition to studio monitors is if you're ever recording voice or acoustic instruments using a microphone. Another reason why you need both headphones and studio monitors is that you hear things differently depending on how you're listening. With headphones, you tend to hear details that you might miss with studio monitors, but studio monitors provide a more natural listening experience. A good set of studio headphones will generally cost between about $150 to $200, and Sony and AKG tend to be popular brands for studio headphones. Coming in at number 5 on the list of essential gear for the home studio is room treatment. If you're like me, or just about any other musician who's recording at home, your home studio is likely set up in a room in your house or apartment, and the acoustics are probably far from ideal. For example, my home studio is a fairly small room at 9 feet by 12 feet, and the walls are parallel, and this can cause sound reflections to build up certain frequencies and to cause other frequencies to kind of evaporate and disappear. So even if you have super high quality studio monitors with extremely accurate sound reproduction, if they're in a room that causes certain frequencies to be accentuated and other frequencies to virtually disappear, it can be difficult, if not outright impossible, to do an accurate mix of your music in that studio space. The good news is that using a couple of different approaches, you can do something about this problem. The first approach involves hanging up sound absorption materials around your studio room to help tame and cut down audio reflections. It's these audio reflections that can cause the buildup of certain frequencies and the loss or disappearance of other frequencies. The second approach involves using an equalizer to help correct the frequency response of your room. You boost up the frequencies that have kind of disappeared, and you cut away the frequencies that have become too abundant. For my studio room, I use a Behringer DEQ 2496 with the optional reference microphone. I don't have any sort of relationship with the company, but I think it's a really cool piece of gear, and so I'll put a link down in the video description. So the way that this unit works is actually pretty cool. It can generate what's called a pink noise signal, and using the specially tuned reference microphone, it measures that pink noise coming out of your studio monitors, reflecting around your studio room, and it automatically generates an EQ curve that is boosted where the frequencies are disappeared and cuts where the frequencies are too abundant. It does this automatically for you, basically correcting any of the deficiencies that you have in your studio room. So after I shot the first part of this video, my wife pointed out that maybe viewers like you might be interested in how I've managed to equip my own home studio with the essential pieces of gear that we talked about. My current computer is a late 2015 27-inch 5K iMac, and it has a 4 GHz i7 processor with 4 cores and 32 gigs of RAM. I also configured it with a 3 terabyte Fusion drive, which is actually something I kind of regret now because the performance is just not quite as good as an SSD. So in general, while personally I do prefer using a Mac, the primary driver behind me using a Mac in my studio is the fact that my DAW of choice is Logic Pro X. I've been a Logic user for over 20 years now, so it's just become kind of a second home for me. So my computer is about 5 years old, and while I'd like to squeeze another year or two out of it, it is at an age where things can start to fail, so I do need to be prepared to replace it soon. So making things just a little bit more complicated, Apple has just announced that they are shifting away from Intel-based processors and moving towards their own Apple Silicon. Now, having worked in IT for the last 20 years or so, I tend to be a little bit hesitant to adopt first generation of new technology, so hopefully this current Mac will hold on for the next iteration or two of the new Apple Silicon. My current audio interface is a Focusrite Sapphire Pro 24 DSP. I got this a few years before I got my iMac, and so unfortunately, Focusrite has just announced this year that they're no longer supporting the device. And that's not surprising. This device actually connects to my computer using FireWire, which is kind of a long abandoned protocol that was replaced by Thunderbolt, which even that was replaced by USB-C. So I don't have any sort of relationship with Focusrite, but I've really enjoyed using this audio interface over the years. And in fact, this is the audio interface that I used to record all of my albums up to this point. So when it comes time to replace it, I'm most likely going to choose another Focusrite device. And the device that I'm currently looking at is the Clarett 8 Pre. It has a bunch more inputs and outputs, which is something that I've kind of needed for the last year or two. For studio monitors, I have a pair of JBL 305s and also a JBL LSR 310 subwoofer. They work great, no complaints whatsoever. I don't know if they make the 305s anymore. I think they are now 305 Mark IIs, but I don't see myself replacing what I have anytime soon because they work just fine. For studio headphones, I have an older pair of Sony MDR CD180s. They look like this. They work just fine. So in terms of room treatment, I already spoke a little bit about my Behringer digital EQ, but the other aspect, of course, is sound absorption panels. Well, the challenge that I have in my room is that 3 out of the 4 walls don't actually have any space whatsoever to hang any sort of sound absorption material, and even my ceiling has a big ceiling fan in the way, so I can't do that either. I just kind of have to deal with the acoustics in this room, and it is what it is. So wow, yeah, that's a lot of information to take in all at once, but I really appreciate you watching, and I hope that this sets you on the right path. Now, of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to jot them down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. I've been Chris. You've been awesome. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching my video. You know the routine. If you enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe. But also, do me a favor, check out the video description for links to my music and my social media. Thank you so much. Cheers.